They broke the oldest galactic law: never cross humanity again. 300 years before the war began, the Council of Nine Stars wrote one simple rule into the law of the galaxy. The rule was only one line long. It was carved into a black stone wall in the high chamber on the planet Velmar Prime. The line read, in the old trade tongue, never cross humanity again. No species was ever told why. The old wise ones who carved those words had died long before anyone thought to ask them. So the younger races just shrugged. They thought it was an old story from a weaker time. They did not take it seriously. The Brennic hegemony was the first to forget the rule. They were a young empire, only 600 years old. They were ruled by proud warriors who loved war the way other people loved music. Their fleets had crushed the Tovari rebels. They had broken the stone hives of the Outer Rim. They had ground the Pale Confederacy into dust in only one lifetime. To the Brennic, the galaxy was a ladder. They were climbing it fast. They wanted to reach the top. The humans, on the other hand, were a quiet kind of people. They held only 4-star systems. They traded with their neighbors in a polite way. They kept to themselves. They asked for nothing. They did not brag. They did not threaten. To the Brennic generals, the humans looked soft. They looked slow. They looked like easy prey. A warlord named Kerthvasan was the one who finally said it out loud in council. He stood up in front of all the great houses of the Brennic. He said the old law was a chain. He said cowards had placed it on his people long ago. He said it was time to break it. He swore that humanity would fall in only one season. He swore that the Brennic flag would fly over Earth before the next harvest. The council voted. Only one old elder voted against the war. His name was Tarun. When they asked him why, he only said that he had read the old books. He said the old books were not kind. The room laughed at him. The vote passed. On a quiet morning on Earth, an ambassador named Daniel Pierce was drinking coffee in his office. The window was open. A bird was singing outside. The room smelled like warm bread. Then a message came in on his desk screen. Pierce read it once. Then he read it again. The Brennic had crossed the neutral zone. 40,000 warships were burning toward the human colonies. Pierce set down his cup. He did not shout. He did not run. He just picked up the phone and called the president. He said only one thing. He said the old warning had been broken. He said it was time to wake the sleepers. Across the human worlds, deep under mountains and under oceans, machines that had been quiet for 200 years began to hum. Old men and women in plain clothes got quiet phone calls. They stood up from gardens. They put down chess pieces. They kissed grandchildren on the forehead. They walked to closets and pulled out uniforms that still fit them. They did not smile. They had been waiting for this call their whole lives. They had hoped, every single day, that the call would never come. One of these sleepers lived on a colony world called New Halden. His name was Eli Brooks. He had been a farmer for 40 years. He had a wife named Mary. He had 3 children and 1 dog. The dog was a small brown thing named Pepper. Eli grew wheat. He grew tomatoes. He played cards on Friday nights with his neighbors. He was a quiet man. He did not talk much. But every Sunday, for 40 years, he had walked out to his barn alone. Inside the barn, behind a tractor, there was a hidden panel. Behind that panel was a stairway. And down those stairs was something the Brennic would soon learn about. On the day the call came, Eli was eating breakfast with Mary. The radio in the kitchen suddenly changed tone. It played 3 notes. Just 3 short notes. Mary stopped chewing. She looked at her husband. She had heard those 3 notes only once before, in a dream she did not like to talk about. Eli set down his fork. He stood up. He walked over to Mary. He kissed her on the forehead. He said he loved her. He said he was sorry. Mary did not cry. She just nodded. She had known, for 40 years, that this day might come. She had hoped it would not. But she had known. Eli walked out to the barn. He pressed his palm against the hidden panel. The barn floor opened with a soft hiss. Cold air rose up from below. Eli walked down the stairs. At the bottom was a wide hangar carved deep into the rock. In the hangar sat a small fighter craft. It was older than his oldest child. It was painted dark gray. It had no markings. Eli had flown this craft in dream simulations every Sunday for 40 years. He had flown it through every kind of battle. He had hoped, every single Sunday, that he would never fly it for real. He climbed inside. The engine woke up. The hangar doors opened above him. Eli Brooks, farmer and grandfather, lifted off into the sky. Across New Halden, the same thing was happening in barns and basements and quiet little garages. Old teachers, old shopkeepers, old grandfathers, old aunts. They all walked to hidden doors. They all climbed into ships and tanks and gun towers that had been waiting under the soil for 200 years. None of them spoke. None of them smiled. They all just got to work. In orbit, the Brennick fleet was already firing on the small defense platform above New Halden. The platform fell in only 11 minutes. The Brennick admirals laughed on their comm channels. They told each other this would be the easiest war of their lives. They ordered the ground troops to drop. Heavy ships full of armored soldiers began to fall toward the wheat fields below. The Brennick generals expected the humans to give up within the hour. They had already prepared the words for their victory speech. They had already chosen which flag would fly over the human capital. They had already picked the day for their parade back home. On the Brennick flagship, Warlord Karth Vossen himself stood on the bridge. He was a tall, heavy creature with dark scales and proud yellow eyes. He watched the troop ships fall through the clouds toward the green farmland below. He smiled. He thought about how he would write this victory into the history books. He thought about the songs that would be sung about him. He turned to his aide and said that the war would be over by sundown. The aide nodded and said yes, sir. But the aide was an older soldier. He had read the old law once, when he was young. He did not say anything. But deep inside, in a small quiet place, he felt afraid. But on Earth, in his quiet office, Ambassador Daniel Pierce was now standing at his window. He was looking out at the bird in the tree. The bird was still singing. Pierce sipped his coffee. He thought about his children. He thought about his wife, who had died 10 years ago. He thought about all the long years of peace. Then he sent one short message to the Council of 9 Stars. The message said only this. Read the old law again. Read it slowly. Remember why it was written. And know that humanity is about to answer the question the galaxy has been afraid to ask for 300 years. The question was simple. What had humans done, the first time someone crossed them, that made the old wise ones carve a warning into stone? They broke the oldest galactic law, never cross humanity again. The first Brennick troop ship hit the ground on New Halden in the middle of a wheat field. The doors slammed open. Heavy soldiers in dark armor jumped out. They held big rifles. They looked at the golden wheat all around them. They laughed. They had been told this would be easy. They had been told the humans were soft. They began to march toward the nearest town. But then something strange happened. The wheat began to move. It did not move like wheat moves in the wind. It moved in straight lines. It moved against the wind. It moved toward the soldiers. The Brennick captain raised a hand. He told his men to stop. He stared at the wheat. The wheat stared back. And then, all at once, the wheat opened up. From under the soil, small drones rose into the air. They were the size of a hand. They were quiet. There were thousands of them. They had been sleeping under the field for 200 years, waiting for a signal. The signal had finally come. The Brennick captain did not even have time to give an order. The drones moved fast. Very fast. They did not fire weapons. They did not need to. They simply struck the soldiers in the joints of their armor, right where the metal was weakest. The Brennick soldiers fell in seconds. The captain was the last one standing. He turned to run. A small drone landed on his back. There was a soft click. Then there was silence. The wheat moved back into place. The field looked empty again. As if nothing had ever happened. Across New Halden, the same scene played out in field after field. The Brennick soldiers had landed in farmland. They had thought the farmland was harmless. They had been wrong. Every farm on every human colony had been seeded with hidden weapons. Drones under the soil. Rail cannons hidden inside grain silos. Whole armored divisions sleeping in cold rooms under shopping malls. Humans had learned, a long time ago, that peace was a thing you had to be ready to defend every single second. So they had built their peace on top of a sleeping army. And then they had planted flowers over it. High above the planet, on his flagship, Warlord Vossen watched his screens go dark one by one. Every troop ship on the ground stopped sending signals. Every soldier stopped reporting in. Vossen felt his stomach turn cold. He told his admiral to send down more men. The admiral, a proud old commander named Veshtaram, gave the order. More ships fell from the sky. More wheat fields opened up. More drones rose. The same silence followed. Within 6 hours, the entire Brennic ground force on New Halden was gone. Not retreating. Just gone. Veshtaram could not believe his eyes. He stared at his readouts. He counted the names of the dead. He felt a cold sweat run down his neck. He gave the order for an orbital bombardment. He would burn the farms. He would burn the towns. He would turn the whole planet into glass. His gunners loaded the big guns. They aimed at the surface. But before they could fire, something happened. The moon of New Halden began to crack. The moon had been there for as long as anyone could remember. It was just a quiet gray rock in the sky. The Brennic had not paid any attention to it. But now, in front of their eyes, the moon split open. A great seam of light appeared across its face. The two halves of the moon slowly pulled apart, like the doors of a huge garage. Inside the moon, there was no rock. Inside the moon, there was a shipyard. The shipyard had been hidden inside the hollow moon for 200 years. No species in the galaxy had ever seen anything like it. The humans had never shown it to anyone. They had never sold the design. They had never spoken of it. They had only built it, deep in the dark, and then waited. Out of the open moon came a single ship. The ship was long and dark and quiet. It had no markings. It had no name. It moved without sound. It moved without engines that anyone could see. It came straight at the Brennic fleet. Admiral Veshtaram stared at the ship. His mouth was open. His hands were shaking. He gave the order to fire. His fleet opened up. Thousands of guns burned in the dark. Bright light filled space. The Brennic shells flew toward the dark ship. But the dark ship did not slow down. It did not turn. It did not even seem to notice. The shells reached it. The shells passed through it. The dark ship kept coming. And then, very gently, the dark ship raised a single weapon. Just one. It fired once. The Brennic flagship, the great pride of Warlord Vossen, simply stopped existing. There was no explosion. There was no fire. There was just a clean, round hole in space where the flagship had been. Warlord Vossen was gone. Veshtaram was gone. The pride of the Brennic navy was gone. The rest of the Brennic fleet stared in horror. Then the dark ship raised its weapon again. The Brennic fleet did not wait. They turned and ran. Down on the surface of New Halden, Eli Brooks landed his fighter craft back in his barn. The hangar doors slid closed above him. He climbed out of the cockpit. His hands were shaking. He had killed 11 Brennic ships in the sky that day. He had not enjoyed it. He had not felt brave. He had only felt tired. He climbed back up the stairs into his barn. He walked across the yard to his house. Mary was waiting for him on the porch. She did not ask him what had happened. She just opened her arms. Eli walked into them and held her for a long time. The dog, Pepper, sat at their feet and did not move. On Earth, in his quiet office, Ambassador Daniel Pierce read the reports as they came in. New Halden was safe. The Brennic fleet had run. The other human colonies were also reporting victory. The sleepers had done their work. Pierce closed his eyes for a moment. He was very tired. He was very old. He did not feel proud. He only felt sad. He picked up his phone. He called the Council of 9 Stars. He asked, in a polite voice, to speak to the chairman. The chairman was a Velmari elder named Lord Senner. He came to the call quickly. His face on the screen looked pale. He had been watching the news from New Halden. He had seen the cracked moon. He had seen the dark ship. He knew what was coming. Pierce spoke to him in a soft voice. Pierce reminded him about the old law on the black stone wall. Pierce asked, very politely, if the council would now like to read that law out loud, in front of every species. Lord Senner swallowed hard. He nodded. He said yes. Pierce thanked him. Then Pierce said one more thing. He said that humanity would now begin to answer the old question. The question the galaxy had been afraid to ask for 300 years. What had humans done, the first time someone crossed them, that made the old wise ones carve a warning into stone? Pierce said the answer was coming. He said it was coming soon. And he said the answer would be remembered. And then he ended the call, sat back in his chair, and looked out at the bird in the tree, which was, somehow, still singing. They broke the oldest galactic law, never cross humanity again. The Council of 9 Stars met in emergency session 3 days later. Every species in the galaxy sent its highest leader. They all came to the Great High Chamber on Velmar Prime. The chamber was a huge round room made of dark stone. In the middle of the room was the old black wall. On the wall, carved in deep letters, was the old law. Never cross humanity again. Every leader who walked into the chamber stopped to read those words. Many of them read the words twice. A few of them read the words 3 times. The room was very quiet. The Brennick seat was empty. The Brennick ambassador had been called home. But no one had been able to reach him. The Brennick homeworld had gone quiet 2 days ago. No messages were going in. No messages were coming out. The Brennick colonies could not reach their capital. Their ships were sitting in dock with no orders. Their armies were standing in empty halls. The whole empire was frozen, like a body waiting for a heart to beat again. But the heart was not beating. Lord Senner, the Velmari chairman, stood at the front of the chamber. He looked very old that day. His hands shook a little as he spoke. He said the council had called this meeting for one reason. The reason was to remember. He said that for 300 years, the galaxy had forgotten why the old law had been written. He said it was now time to remember. He called a single witness to the floor. Her name was Eleanor. She was an old Velmari historian. Her hair was white. Her eyes were sharp. She had spent her whole life reading old books that no one else cared about. Eleanor walked to the center of the room. She did not look afraid. She did not look proud. She only looked sad. She told the council that she had spent 50 years putting the story back together. She had read old letters. She had read old maps. She had read old logs from ships that no one remembered. And she had found the answer. The answer to the question that everyone had been afraid to ask. Why had the old wise ones carved a warning into stone? Eleanor told them about a species called the Gorin. The name made the room go cold. A few of the older delegates flinched. Most of the younger ones had never heard the word before. Eleanor said that 300 years ago, the Gorin had been a great power. They had ruled 700 worlds. Their fleet had darkened stars. Their cities had been wonders of the galaxy. Their poets had been famous. Their music had been loved. They had been mighty. And one day, the Gorin had decided, just as the Brennick had now decided, that the humans looked like prey. The room waited. Eleanor took a slow breath. She said that no one remembered the Gorin today. Not because the Gorin had been forgotten by accident. But because there were no Gorin left to remember. Not a single one. Not a colony hiding in the dark. Not a refugee on a quiet world. Not a child kept safe by some kind stranger. The Gorin were gone. Their 700 worlds had been turned into glass, or buried under green forests, or simply emptied of people and left alone. Their language had been pulled out of every library in the galaxy, gently, slowly, over 20 long years. Their books had been bought up and locked away. Their songs had been forgotten. Their gods had been forgotten. Even their name had nearly been forgotten. The humans, Eleanor said, had not just won the war with the Gorin. They had erased the Gorin from history. They had done it patiently. They had done it kindly, in a way. They had not been cruel. They had simply made sure that, in time, no one would ever know the Gorin had ever lived. The old law had been carved by the few species who had watched it happen and understood. Never cross humanity again. Because if you do, no one will ever remember that you were here. The room was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Some of the delegates were crying quietly. Most of them were just staring at the floor. Far away from the council, on the Brennick homeworld, 3 small dark ships were moving in close to the planet. They were quiet. They were smooth. The Brennick defense grid did not see them coming. It had been built to look for big fleets. It had not been built to look for 3 small dark ships. On the lead ship, a captain stood on the bridge. His name was Walter Hayes. He was 63 years old. He had 3 grandchildren. He had a small house with a garden back on Earth. His tomatoes needed staking. He did not want to be here. He had never wanted to be here. Captain Hayes had been chosen for this duty the day he was born. His name had been on a list. The list was very short. Only a few hundred humans in every generation were on it. They were the ones who would do the quiet work, the work no one else could do. Hayes had trained for this every day of his life. He had studied the Brennick language. He had studied the Brennick culture. He had studied the way Brennick soldiers thought. He had studied the way Brennick mothers sang to their children. He knew the Brennick better than the Brennick knew themselves. And now he was here. Hayes did not give the order to fire. He did not destroy any cities. He did not kill anyone. Instead, he did something much worse. He sent out one single broadcast. The broadcast went out on every Brennick frequency. It went into every Brennick radio, every Brennick screen, every Brennick phone. The broadcast was a voice. The voice was Warlord Kareth Vossen himself. Or it sounded like him. The humans had built the voice from old recordings. It was perfect. Even Vossen's own mother would not have known the difference. The fake voice told the Brennick that the war was over. It said that the humans had been merciful. It said that the Brennick would now lay down their weapons. It said that the great houses would now bow to the humans. It said that any Brennick who did not obey was a traitor. The message played once. Then it played again. Then it played a third time. Across the Brennick Empire, fleets paused in space. Officers looked at each other in shock. Loyal soldiers turned to their commanders for orders. Some of them obeyed. Some of them did not. Confusion spread like fire. Within one day, Brennick ships were firing at other Brennick ships. The Loyalists called the doubters traitors. The doubters called the Loyalists fools. Families argued. Generals argued. Brothers argued. By the time the truth came out, by the time someone realized the message had been a forgery, the Brennick Empire had already cracked along 100 lines. There was no putting it back together. There was no leader strong enough to bring the pieces back. The Empire had been broken from the inside, without a single human shot. Captain Walter Hayes watched it all on his screens. He did not smile. He did not cheer. He only sat in his chair very quietly. He thought about his grandchildren. He thought about his tomatoes back home. He thought about how much he wanted a cup of coffee. He turned to his crew and said, in a soft voice, that the work here was done. He said it was time to go home. The 3 small dark ships turned around. They left the Brennick homeworld behind. They did not look back. They did not need to. Behind them, the Brennick Empire was already falling apart, all on its own, just the way the humans had planned. They broke the oldest galactic law: never cross humanity again. What came next was not a war in the way the galaxy understood war. There were no great battles. There were no burning fleets. There were no last stands by brave Brennick heroes. The humans did not give the Brennick the gift of a real fight. Instead, the humans began the quiet work. The same kind of work they had done to the Gorin 300 years before. They did it slowly. They did it gently. They did it without anger. And that, in the end, was the most frightening thing of all. First came the historians. Human archivists started arriving on neutral worlds. They were polite. They were soft-spoken. They wore plain gray suits. They smiled often. They visited libraries. They visited museums. They visited old bookshops in the back streets of small towns. They asked, very kindly, if they could buy any Brennick books that the shop happened to have. They paid in gold. They paid in real money. They paid more than the books were worth. The shopkeepers were happy. The shopkeepers thanked them. Then the books were gone. The humans took them away in plain crates. The crates went to a place no one knew. The books were not burned. The books were not torn up. The books were simply locked away in a vault somewhere deep in human space. The vault had no windows. The vault had no door anyone could find. The books were still in there. They are still in there now. No one will ever read them again. The Brennick poetry, the Brennick history, the Brennick children's stories. All of it. Silent. Locked. Forgotten. Then came the diplomats. A woman named Clara Bennett led the work. She was small. She had soft brown eyes. She had once been an elementary school teacher. She had taught 7-year-olds how to read. Now she traveled from world to world. She met with the leaders of every species in the galaxy. She drank tea with them. She smiled at them. She asked, in a gentle voice, if they would please stop saying the word Brennick on their news broadcasts. She did not threaten. She did not raise her voice. She only explained, kindly, that humanity would prefer it. Every leader Clara Bennett met agreed. Every single one. They had all read The Obsidian Wall. They had all seen the news from New Halden. They had all watched the Brennick Empire fall apart. None of them wanted to be next. So they nodded. They smiled back at the kind teacher. They promised. And then they went home and quietly changed their news. They removed the Brennick name from the weather reports. They removed it from the trade reports. They removed it from the school books. They removed it from the songs the children sang. Then came the engineers. Big quiet ships full of human terraforming crews arrived at the Brennick worlds. The worlds had been emptied. The Brennick had been moved off, gently, by hand. They had been given new homes on small quiet worlds, far away, with no other Brennick nearby. Each family had been placed in a different system. The humans had been kind about it. They had given the Brennick families gardens. They had given them new names. The Brennick parents had not been told what was happening. The Brennick children had been told it was an adventure. And the children, who were young, had believed. On the empty Brennick worlds, the human engineers got to work. They did not bomb the cities. They did not break the temples. They did not pull down the great statues of old Brennick kings. They only changed the air. Slowly. Very slowly. Over 20 years, the air on each Brennick world was changed by a tiny amount each day. Plants were brought in. Trees were planted. Vines were seeded. Rivers were rerouted. Oceans were filled with new fish. The cities did not fall. The cities were simply swallowed. Green vines climbed up the towers. Forests grew between the houses. Moss covered the temples. Hills rose up over the streets. If you visited a Brennick world 100 years later, you would find only a beautiful wild forest. You would walk through soft green hills. You would hear birds singing. You would see deer in the meadows. You would sit by a clear blue lake and have a picnic. You would never know that a city had once stood there. You would never know that 1 million people had once lived where you sat. The bones of the Brennick Empire were still down there, under the moss and the soil. But you would never find them. You would not even think to look. Then, last of all, came the children. Not human children fighting Brennick children. Nothing like that. The work with the children was much quieter than that. Human teachers, in human schools, simply stopped teaching the word Brennick. Not by law. Not by order. Just by choice. The history books still mentioned the war, for one more generation. They called it the trouble of the outer worlds. They did not name the enemy. The next generation of human children did not ask. They had other things to learn. Math. Music. Gardening. How to fix an engine. How to bake bread. The grandchildren of those children grew up not knowing that a Brennick had ever lived. The great-great-grandchildren of those grew up not knowing that a war had ever happened. The name Brennick faded out of human speech like a name slips off the tongue when no one says it for too long. After 50 years, only the oldest humans remembered the Brennick at all. After 100 years, only the historians. After 200 years, only the deepest vaults, deep under mountains, deep under oceans, kept the truth. And those vaults did not open for anyone. Ambassador Daniel Pierce watched all of this from his quiet office on Earth. He was very old now. His hair was white. His hands were thin. He drank his coffee slowly. He read the reports as they came in. He did not feel proud. He did not feel happy. He only felt very, very tired. Sometimes, late at night, he would sit by his window and look up at the stars. He would think about the Brennick mothers who had been moved away from each other. He would think about the Brennick children who would grow up not knowing they were the last of their kind. He would think about the warlord, Kerthvasen, who was now only a clean round hole in space. Pierce did not weep. He had stopped weeping a long time ago. He only sat by his window and watched the stars. And every night, before he went to bed, he would whisper one short prayer. He would whisper the same prayer his father had whispered, and his grandfather before that. The prayer went like this. Let no one ever cross us again. Let no one ever make us do this again. Let the bird outside our window keep singing. Let the wheat keep growing in our fields. Let the children grow up in peace. Let us be left alone. Please. Let us be left alone. And then he would close the curtain. And he would go to bed. And somewhere far away, on a quiet new world, a small Brennick girl with a new human name was being tucked into bed by a kind human woman who had once been an elementary school teacher. The little girl did not know who she was. She did not know who she had been. She did not know what her family had once done, in some faraway place, that had brought her here. She only knew that the woman was kind. And that the bed was warm. And that, outside her window, a bird was singing. And then the little Brennick girl, last of her line, closed her eyes and slept. They broke the oldest galactic law, never cross humanity again. 50 years passed. The galaxy was quiet again. Trade ships moved between the stars. Children of many species played together on shared worlds. Music traveled across the void. New songs were written. New books were printed. New ideas were born. The Brennick were not mentioned. The Gorin were not mentioned. The war that no one remembered had ended. The peace that no one questioned had begun. On the planet Velmar Prime, the Council of 9 Stars called a great meeting. Every species in the galaxy sent its leader. They all came to the great high chamber. The chamber looked just as it had before. The huge round room. The high stone ceiling. The dark walls. But one thing was different. The old black wall, the one that had held the old law for 300 years, was gone. In its place stood a new wall. The new wall was made of the same black stone. But the writing on it was different. The new writing did not hide the truth. It did not speak in old riddles. The Velmari elders had decided that the time for short warnings was over. The time for hiding the meaning was over. The new wall told the story. The whole story. It told the story of the Gorin. It told the story of the Brennick. It did not exaggerate. It did not lie. It did not even try to make humanity sound brave. It only told what had happened, in plain words, in every language of the galaxy. At the bottom of the new wall, there was one sentence. The sentence was written in big letters. Every leader who walked into the chamber was required to read that sentence out loud, in their own language, before they could sit down. The Velmari elders had been firm about this rule. They had said that no one, ever again, would be allowed to say they had not understood. The leaders accepted the rule. They had no choice. They all read the words out loud. The sentence said this. The humans are not your equals. The humans are not your enemies. The humans are not your gods. The humans are the people who buried 2 empires under green forests and planted flowers on their graves. Do not test them. Do not study them. Do not even say their name in anger. Live next to them in peace, and they will live next to you forever. Cross them, and you will not be killed. You will be forgotten. And to be forgotten, as the Gorin and the Brennick have learned, is the only true death. Ambassador Daniel Pierce came to the ceremony. He was very old now. His back was bent. His hair was white as snow. He walked with a thin wooden cane. He wore a plain gray suit. He did not bring guards. He did not bring aides. He came alone. He stood at the back of the chamber. He listened as each leader, one by one, read the new words out loud. Some of the leaders spoke loudly. Some of them spoke softly. But all of them spoke clearly. None of them stumbled. None of them rushed. They all meant what they said. After the ceremony, a young Velmari archivist walked over to Daniel Pierce. The archivist was tall and slim. He was only 40 years old, which is young for a Velmari. He had wide, curious eyes. He had read every book in his school library. He was not afraid of much. He bowed to the old human. Then he asked, in a polite but bold voice, if humanity was proud of what it had done. Daniel Pierce did not answer at once. He stood very still. He looked up at the high ceiling. He looked at the new wall. He looked at the empty chairs of the council. He thought for a long time. The young archivist waited. He did not push. He did not speak. He only waited. Finally, Pierce turned his head. He looked the young Velmari in the eye. And then he spoke. He said that pride was not the right word. He said humanity had not wanted this duty. He said humanity had never wanted it. He said that every human child grew up knowing the truth. Under every wheat field on every human world, there were sleeping weapons. Under every quiet town, there were sleeping armies. And behind the smile of every kind old human grandfather, there was a soldier who had hoped, every day of his life, that he would never be called. The peace humanity had built was a peace that could survive any storm. But the price of that peace was the willingness to do, when needed, the terrible quiet things that no one else in the galaxy was willing to do. Humanity did not enjoy it. Humanity only understood it. The young archivist listened in silence. He did not write anything down. He only listened. When Pierce was done, the young Velmari bowed again. He thanked the old man. He said he would remember the words. He said he would tell his children. He said he would tell his children's children. Pierce smiled, just a little. He patted the young archivist on the shoulder. Then he turned and walked slowly out of the chamber, into the bright afternoon light of an alien sun. He climbed into a small ship. He flew home. Back on Earth, Pierce went straight to his garden. The tomatoes were ripe. The basil needed cutting. The bird was still in the tree outside his window, singing the same song it had sung 50 years ago. Pierce knelt down by his tomato plants. His old knees hurt. But he did not mind. He picked the tomatoes one by one, slowly, with care. He put them in a small wooden basket. He carried the basket inside. He made himself a sandwich. He sat by his window. He ate the sandwich. He drank a cup of coffee. He watched the bird in the tree. Far above him, in orbit around the human worlds, the hidden shipyards still slept inside their hollow moons. The drones under the wheat fields still waited. The old soldiers in their gardens, all across human space, still watered their tomatoes and played with their grandchildren. None of them wanted to be called again. None of them hoped for another war. They wanted only the quiet life. They wanted only the soft sound of a bird outside a window. They wanted only the smell of warm bread in the morning. But they were ready. They had to be ready. Being ready was the price of the peace. And in the high chamber on Velmar Prime, the new wall stood tall and dark. Every day, leaders from every species walked past it. Every day, they read the words again. Some of them stopped and stood for a long time. Some of them touched the cold stone with their hands. Some of them simply walked by with bowed heads. None of them laughed. None of them mocked. None of them rolled their eyes. They had all learned. The galaxy had learned. Never cross humanity again. Not because humanity was cruel. Not because humanity was angry. Not because humanity was strong. But because humanity remembered. And humanity, when crossed, made very sure that no one else ever could. The bird in the tree outside Daniel Pierce's window kept singing. The wheat in the fields kept growing. The children kept playing. The grandfathers kept gardening. And the galaxy, for the first time in a very long time, kept its promise. And it kept that promise for 1,000 quiet years, and then for 1,000 more after that.